Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
That's it. Yeah, his pass strips. Wilson with the run out. Natural scorer.
Store finds Dickinson inside. He puts it in, score it. Hunter Dickinson to the line.
The number one scorer takes it hard to the glass. Nothing there. Rebound Ejiofor down deep. And he puts it up and in. Subi Ejiofor. St. John at 72-65.
Dickinson, another offensive rebound. This time it'll go possession arrow as they continue to wrestle.
There we go. Don't come in there. Let them just break it up themselves.
Trey Galloway initiating. They're trying to get it to Goody. Instead, Galloway cuts in. Kicks to Bacco. And he drops it. And now it's a 4-point game. Leach has been hot. And he stays hot. Threw up an air ball. Kicked out to Barry. Tapped back home by Martinelli. Oh, what a find inside to Jerron Gary. Williams to Gary, a combo that's worked well for the Huskers. Gary splits two defenders all the way to the rim. 6 points for Gary, all from point-blank range. Inside, Gary again to the rim. And a chance for one more.
Good morning. Welcome in to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, presented by Centris Federal Credit Union. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. What's up, DB?
That whole presented thing has a nice ring to it.
I do like it.
Presented by
Centris Federal Credit. They're our friends.
Presented by.
You big Centris guy?
Yeah.
We love Centris.
I like a lot of people that like us.
I do too.
And Centris, if you like us, I love you.
That's right.
I love you, Centris. What?
You all right there?
Are you?
You doing okay?
Yes. yes. I'm okay. It's a lot of pretty hot takey night. So
Oh, we got some hot takes?
well, this is a real hot takey kind of night.
You got any of your favorites you want to share? Hot takes?
So now we are back kind of bummed about the roster, as if this isn't like it didn't sneak up on us.
Yeah, it hasn't changed.
Yeah. So you have to be very, very, very careful.
Okay.
Because remember when they were winning and we were like, hey, got to give some credit to kind of the chemistry and kind of the guys knowing their roles and how you put this thing together.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're not yielding the results that we want, we can't go back, or we ought not. Ought not?
Ought not?
Ought not. So then go back and have that be kind of the reason for your treason, right?
Sure.
I mean, I get it. It's fluid, but you really can't have it both ways. So it's like kind of, I like to say, you don't get a lot of that life without some of those cast members in it. So the big thing, is they got to manage their way through it. Like you really have to.
Here's my question, though.
You have to really manage your way through it. It better be a good one.
I don't know if it is or not. We'll see.
Well, then maybe you shouldn't ask. Are you sure?
But you're winning.
We'll find out. I think the question people are asking themselves now is, do they want this life?
As fans?
Well, as like with that the roster gives you, right? If you can't have this life without this cast in it.
Okay, what's your alternative though?
Well, I don't know.
You don't have one.
I mean, not now you don't.
Yeah. So
But I think that's how people are viewing it in their head, right? They're like, oh, we thought we liked this thing earlier. Maybe it's not what we thought it was. Right? This team maybe isn't what people thought it was at one point earlier in the season.
Sounds a lot like fandom.
I mean, it is fandom. That's mostly who we're talking to.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could be talking to you because you're going to have to own it here shortly, too, with Creighton. For as much hand-wringing and bitching and moaning as you did about the roster, and not just you, I mean, people in general that didn't like the roster construction are going to ride this wave down the stretch of you're going to be all in like, oh, okay, like I'm in. Because when we make these sweeping generalizations real time, sometimes we kind of just box ourselves in. Like it can always change. And in the sports landscape and competition, it can change in a hurry. I mean, in a hurry with what's going on in terms of how we look at these conferences, man. I mean, you watch I feel like we watch basketball out every day because of how we interact during basketball games. Like, I feel like there's a group of us that are in front of the television.
Oh, yeah,
together,
okay, yeah.
Like watching games out. And I just this morning, because I'm on self-quarantine in my house because it is a grade A debacle. I mean, I've never been so happy for tremendous quad boxes.
It's like World War Z up in there. Just gotta
God.
stay out of here again.
Man. God dang war zone. But the quad boxes have been on fire, right?
Oh yeah, no, they've had good selections.
They've been legit.
Yeah.
And it's like I just was kind of going back through because sometimes I just want a good chuckle, so I try to scroll through and I see what DeMarinis may have said or what you may have said when you clap back or something. And every day, on almost every exchange, and there's hundreds now.
Yeah,
where it's like, I can't believe, and then fill in the blank.
Sure. Or are we sure?
Yep.
Fill in the blank.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So I think we just got to ride it.
I think it is an accurate reflection of this basketball season.
It's
because it's a total crapshoot.
Yeah.
I mean, last night we're watching Xavier St. John's before the Nebraska game, right?
Who gave the laughing emoji to Richmond? Was that you?
I think so.
Yeah. I'm like,
oh,
we were talking about Kadari.
Yeah, I think I just said classic and then laughed at it because that's the Kadari Richmond we know and love.
Yeah,
but I think it's an accurate reflection of what this basketball season is because you've asked the question a couple weeks now. You're like, are we sure St. John's is good? And then DeMarinis goes, hey, maybe Xavier is kind of the team that might be good we missed, or because they had a stumble early. And I'm like, are we sure either of these teams are good?
Yeah.
Because I'm not. The St. John's is going to win a lot of games, but I don't trust them at all because offensively it is horrifying.
So and the score last night was exactly as I picked it. Not exactly. 1 point off as I picked it the other way. I said 78-72 Nebraska.
Yep.
And it was 78-73 SC.
Yeah.
And as we got up from the table, you're like, hey, are you going to tweet out your picks? I was like, man, I don't know. Like, I like a couple of things. And you're like, oh, what's that? I'm like, I like Northwestern.
Yep.
I like Northwestern. I feel like
and they covered.
That line is bonkers.
Stinky.
Give me the Wildcats. Yep. And I said, the other one, I want to give out Nebraska.
Yeah.
The only reason I hedged, it's because I almost never, ever, ever lock up any team that I know the way that I feel about, like Nebraska.
Yeah, a team you like.
Not just that, because I'll give you. I'll tell you about Carolina.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Just not Nebraska.
Yeah.
Almost because I feel like I know too much.
Yeah, Nebraska and Creighton, for me, Nebraska football, Creighton basketball are the ones I can't.
And I can cap. And I'm pretty good with Creighton.
You're really good at Creighton basketball.
Like I
can't cap either of those at all.
But when it comes to Nebraska, I'm just like, you know what?
I just didn't know what to expect.
Like I called a couple of you guys in New York. I'm like, man, Nebraska by 1,000.
Yeah.
Like I felt, and it's rare. Like it only happens to me like a couple of times a year, and sometimes it's to the bad.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'm like,
oh no,
ooh, these guys may get rolled.
Yeah.
You know, but even that didn't happen last year.
No. The one that got me, or the thing that got me about Nebraska last night was I don't know where their headspace is at all.
Is it because things happen like with the starting lineup?
No.
Okay. Because I felt like that was kind of the catalyst for
something like
for the negativity of the roster.
Yeah.
Like, we have to start Ulyss. I was like,
you don't have to.
You guys, this is just me in my head, so this is totally another made-up child.
You guys.
Just the other day, we were like, oh, man, Euless kind of settled it down. If he actually looked like a true point guard. He was the assists guy, and they were good on the road. So why was that going to be like this? Didn't have to be a travesty. We know he's going to be a limited scoring.
Mm-hmm.
But they guarded him like a scorer. It's not like they gave him 6-7 feet and played ball screens different. Like he was still.
Yeah, they still respected the space.
So it's like, I don't know. It just is what it is.
I think it was one of those things that you did something different. So if it didn't go well, it was going to be the focus of the ire, right? Yeah. Like that's sort of how these things go. If you make a change, doesn't go the way people want, it's going to be, that's the thing people are going to focus on, right? But I don't know. I have a really hard time with this particular Nebraska team because I don't think they're as bad as the 5-game losing streak, right?
So you know what? Like that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I hope that's what people are frustrated with, but that's not what I hear. I hear that we've kind of resigned ourselves to this.
Just not being very good.
Going back to this roster.
Yeah.
They're better. I'm telling you.
Like it's the same team that was 12-2.
They're better. And so now we get schedule and non-con talk, which I think is ridiculous. But anyway, I'm not even going to go there. We just have to they're better than they're performing in this 5-game stretch. So if you're frustrated, be frustrated at that.
Sure, yeah.
You like I think that should be.
I can't remember who we were talking to. It was, I think, either Schaaf or BC from Husker 24/7. And
probably Schaaf, man. That dude is a huge basketball fan.
I asked them, hey, they're not good enough defensively to hang their hat on that. They're not good enough offensively to hang their hat on that. What does that then look like? And they said, it means your margin of error is really thin. And that's the case. That's what's true for this team. If they're not really locked in defensively like they weren't in the second half, then things are going to be able to get away from you. Like you don't have a ton of room for error. Going to Creighton, like you were talking about earlier, Creighton's pretty similar in that sense. They don't have a lot of room for error. Now they've started giving themselves a little bit more because they've started locking in defensively in a way they weren't earlier in the season. But
and I think they showed you over this weekend they have more margin than you think.
Yes, they do. But especially earlier in the season, Creighton had almost no margin for error because some of those guys hadn't gotten comfortable in roles, right? Jemiah Neal looks dramatically more comfortable in his role than he did a month ago or 2 months ago, right? Nebraska is not at a point where they have a ton of margin for error yet. And when you lose focus for just a second in conference play, that gets away from you. We saw it with Iowa. They lost focus for just a second, and that thing got away from them. Like Purdue, I'm not sure they ever had focus, right? But the Iowa, the Rutgers, and the USC games, and Maryland too, are all pretty similar in the sense of Nebraska has to stay locked in the entire game. They don't have the luxury of going through these bad spurts, right? They don't have the offensive firepower to overcome it, and they don't have the defensive, whether it's rim protection or super athletic wings to lock guys up. They don't have that physical fallback defensively to not be super locked in all the time. And that's, I think, what we're seeing here. Because I do think this team is better than their 5-game losing streak. They're probably not as good as a 12-2 start. It's probably somewhere in the middle, right? But where does that leave you? Where does that leave you with, 10, 12 games left in the regular season? I don't know. That's still, because I don't know if this is going to continue, the underachieving, or if they'll be able to find some equilibrium on the way out.
Like, I don't want to just dumb it down to like the actual hard number, but generally speaking, like, at what point is 5 of 24 not a roster issue? That's my question. So you have to be, when you're going to have these kind of conversations, and you're in the solutions business. No, I'll tell you, listen, sometimes people just want to bitch to be bitching, or they don't really know what they're talking about, and so you just kind of grab headlines, and you're like, oh, I don't really pay attention, but I want to say a bunch of things. Like, at what point is 5 of 24 not a roster issue? I get it, because you may come back and if you said to me, you're like, man, damn, DB, like they need more shooters. And I'd be like, oh, okay. You're probably right. Somebody other than a Sejan has to be a little more consistent from behind the arc, or maybe it's Bryce. And I wouldn't say but I would say Nebraska needs to understand how to play to their strengths too when it comes to shot selection.
That's where I would have gone, shot selection.
Okay, so I completely understand you want them to have another shooter. But at some point early on, like even when it's at home, when Gary has better stats, like he can't just be shooting threes on that possession or two when your margin of error is that small.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And and here, like, I'm not blaming JG because, I mean, without him, they're not in that game.
Sure, but that's a good example.
But that's an
of
example of what that's an example of what I'm talking about.
I mean, Berkay. Let's use Berkay for an example. Guy goes 0 for 3 from 3-point range. He goes 3 for 3 on twos. He hasn't shot the ball well. There's really no indication that he's going to shoot the ball well, even if he's capable.
And he's hard to guard without fouling. So, like,
why would you give people the out?
Like
it's a free out.
Somebody asked me, was it on DM? Man, I should find it, but I get buried. Somebody was asking me the difference between like freedom to play without restriction versus, hey, listen, this is what you do. You need to be doing this.
Sure.
Right?
Freedom is never like all encompassing.
And we just
for almost anybody.
We just heard a great coach yesterday. And we'll talk to Coatney. I call him Coatney sometimes. I did that during our players' banquet. I called one of our players out loud in front of the parents what I call him because he's that in my phone. And everybody thought that was like the funniest dumb thing ever. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's who he is in my phone. I'd like to get that back. I don't call him daddy.
Just reel it back in.
Say what you got to say.
It was cute. It was Quentin.
Yeah.
And I call him cute daddy because he acts like he's 60.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's like we just heard Amy say, hey, you know, I'm not one of our philosophy when we're in practice. She's empowering her players. Right. So she said something to the effect of, it's not like I say, ooh, it's not a bad shot. It's, if you're going to take that shot within the confines of our offense, let's get better at it. That is a very fine line, and you have to have tremendous command of your what's that
program,
your space.
Okay,
because it can get away from you in a hurry.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. Especially if you don't walk that line correctly.
Yeah. But, you know, it's like if we're in practice and we're going through, you know, Cowboy passing period or something and everything's a shot play, it's like you're like, we probably should just play a little more catch. Let's check it down a little so we don't hold the ball so long.
Sure.
But you're not going to say, hey, don't bang that skinny, right? If it's open. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's this thing. But if I'm like Berkay or like, how would you guard that guy without fouling?
He's super awkward.
But you have to like tell him to play that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and there's
or let take Twice as nice or Bryce. Like you can't go 14 minutes without shooting a field goal.
Yeah. That's not feasible.
You know what I mean? But do you say, hey man, shoot the ball? And I'm sure they might. They may say to Mia, like he has to be maddening.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you just want to look at Brax. You just want to be like, hey, B-Rax, got to be tougher. You're going to be okay.
You're big. I need you to play big.
I need you to be this.
Yeah.
And just kind of see. So I think we can make some of these sweeping judgments about holes in the roster, what they can't do. I think now you got to really zero in and say, okay, we gotta guys, we tried it the other way. We're very capable. Let's get back to defining who and what we are. And it's hard in the middle of a
kind of a skid.
A skid.
Yeah.
Because morale starts to creep in.
Existential a little bit.
Yeah. But I mean, it doesn't. You don't have to resign yourself to it. You don't, man. I just watched a team play in Evanston last night, and yes, they have my attention. because I do think they're capable, and also I'm curious to see if I can figure out Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not everybody doesn't have to resign themselves to what they have been.
Sure.
You can be something different.
Yeah.
Like you can.
Yeah.
And so I'm not.
I
Like
think
they gotta help themselves. I get it. They're exhausting. It's an exhausting program.
yeah, it's a tough program to follow sometimes.
But they can get out of this. I'm telling you.
I think there's a thing in players' minds where, and this is really it's really difficult to break them of. Just because you can make that shot doesn't mean you should take that shot.
That's
there's a really big difference there.
I think that's the biggest issue on offense, in my opinion, is quality shot selection.
Like, just because you can make that shot, does that mean it's the best thing you do for us?
And
right?
I said this a couple of weeks ago. I think somebody jumped on me. It might have been my man, Kobe Bean. When he was like, man, Asijan made 4 threes, like, and you're worried about shot selection? And I was like, and I admitted, I'm like, hey, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
On the surface, that doesn't sound, it sounds kind of like a dumb thing to say. But in a one possession game with, 24 seconds left on the shot clock, I probably don't shoot those 2 threes.
Yeah.
I'm just
sometimes you have to take that shot in context of what it is.
Yeah, I'm not saying
oh, I'll take 4 for 10 or 4 for 11.
Yeah, because that's a deal at practice or in a game where you're saying you're not telling that guy don't shoot a 3. You just have to be cognizant of
time and score
situation.
Time and score. Yeah, like
and it happened. It happened a handful of times.
It happens a lot.
It happens a lot. And I'm like, and I'm not just talking about Asijan because
no, with this team in general.
I'm like, ooh, that's not
a good time for that.
That's not
not a good time for that.
Just not, especially in kind of a pendulum, a metronome kind
felt
of.
Like
back
it was very
forth.
fragile.
Right.
The game was.
Yeah, and what happened was you would let SC kind of off the hook
because their shot selection was also terrible.
It's not good.
Horrifying.
It's like, I mean,
horrifying. I wanted to throw Yates out a window.
Yeah, so
frustrating.
You know the interesting thing about him?
What's that?
You have to kind of probably let him go because without inserting him into the lineup after the injury, like you need.
No, I get they need him
to kind of play like that.
He's one of those you don't get this life without me in it.
Yeah,
but then they need him in it.
Yeah,
right. But as a person who just likes quality basketball, I want to throw him out a window.
It's
like it's the price you pay because you need his skill set. If you're USC,
you just inexplicably can't allowing a team to go 6 of 12 in one half from 3 that shoots 35% as a team after going 0 for 9 in the first half. I'm going to tell you, like, that's a dialed in issue. That's not a roster issue. And that's not to say that they don't have holes in the roster.
Yeah.
Just don't resign yourself to that because you still have games to go play.
Yeah.
You got to play within it.
Yeah, I mean, go look at Rutgers, right? Not a roster issue. Good players. Not very good basketball team, right? Like it's not you can't just get better talent and think all this goes away.
Yeah.
That's why it's not a roster issue.
It's an interesting phenomenon.
That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back, Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage, reminding you to keep your eyes focused and straight ahead. Little slick out there this morning in some spots. Had just a dusting of snow. That was for DB. Just a little bit of snow last night. Make things a little prettier here when it's cold, but
it's not pretty.
It does make
still ugly.
It still makes the roads a little bit more treacherous. Make sure you're focused. That's your job as a driver, is to drive. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office with a little bit of ad-libbing for me and DB in there about the weather.
I like the NDOT.
We love NDOT, and we love when people get where they're going safely.
Got that right.
That being said, we never really know where we're going on this show, but I know at 7:43 we're going to talk to Matt Coatney, play-by-play voice for Nebraska women's basketball. Appreciate the Goatney, as DB likes to call him, joining us here at 7:43. 8:43 will be Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider, and 9 o'clock, our Thursday regular, Michael Bruntz. DB.
Yeah, baby. What?
I don't know. That just caught me funny.
Dude, I'm a funny dude.
Was not expecting that tone of voice.
I'm sorry.
It sounded like something out of Swamp People.
No, Kobe's got me going.
What's Kobe got you
on? Number one, I wasn't picking up what he was putting down.
Mm-hmm.
But now that he's Now that I got it, I think he's on to something, because it's a weird word to throw around, but I'm going to use it because the team did.
Okay.
And the coaching staff did. So my man Kobe was talking about, like, he said it's frustrating to have this team still be talking about toughness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, yeah. Like, I think I kind of know what they're talking about when they say this, because you're hearing players say it. Because quietly, nobody really wanted to call him out by name. But remember when Gary took the podium a couple games ago and he was talking about what we need to do, and then you watched him play, and then it was like, well, Gary, you got to do what you say. Like, don't just be that guy at the podium. And we heard, like, guys would do, like, their hits, or they would be on their podcasts, and they would say things like, well, we got to be – everybody has to be accountable for who they need to be on this team. Like, you got to step up. You can't just talk it. You got to be it. I think they were kind of talking about Gary to some degree, because he had laid a couple of eggs on the road. Just my feel for kind of, because it could only be Gary or Bryce, right? Because you have two kind of guys, and when you say you need them to be who they say they're going to be. So I think the other thing, when those guys speak and they're talking about things like toughness, it's not necessarily like, don't confuse effort and toughness. We lump them we're a big ET school. Yeah. Big ET school. Like all we ever talk about is effort and toughness. And we define each clearly
and differently.
And they are different.
Yeah.
You need them both. But they are two different things. And so sometimes, like, if I'm talking about, like, Mia willing to get fouled or stand in and take one, or sometimes it's something as subtle, and QI roll, but coaches will vibe with me. If we hit Mac up right now, he'd be like, yeah, I'm telling you. Like, if you take a charge or you give a foul and you go to the ground, there's something about being the first one up off the ground. Yeah. There just is. There's something about, if you get knocked into the media, photog section, there's something about hopping back up. Yeah. There's something about getting knocked to the ground on one end and sprinting back to the other. There just is. It's just like this psychological game, especially when you're at the crib. Like, when you're at the house and you got to defend your yard, you don't see these yard dogs that kind of mope around. Like, real yard dogs guard their yard. They just do. There's a manner in which they carry themselves. Like, you don't have any, cropped-eared, slouched-eared, droop-eared dogs ready to defend their yard. You know what I mean? So there's something about getting off the hardwood, or taking a foul, or when you're in the post and you're dribbling your brains out. Like, don't do something cute. Like, play through guys. Play into guys. Like, be willing to get out of your own comfort zone. Let's say you're a finesse guy. Like, if I'm Berke, and don't settle for a three. You're capable, but when you're putting it on the ground, you're good with both the ground. You're putting it on the deck. You're good with both hands. Like, be willing to get hammered. Yeah. Because there's something to that. I cheer for an extremely soft team, right? And I know I've just seen it, right? If you're not, because people will they sense it. They sense it.
If you're soft, they'll smell it.
They sense that, you know what, they're not really about that life. And you just said a month ago that this team was going to be built on defensive-minded toughness. Then you have to exude it,
and they don't right now.
You don't. You got to be willing to get knocked over.
Not
you have to be
everybody,
willing to give a hard foul. You have to be willing.
Then you have to be willing to get back up.
You know what I mean?
That's the key, right?
So I think that's what people are talking. I think that's what the toughness team is talking about when guys and Coach Hoiberg reference toughness at the podium.
So there's a couple things there that you brought up that kind of made alarm bells go off in my mind. Number one, I do think yes, Bryce and Juwan need to be who they have to be. But I also think when they say things like that of like, hey, people need to be what they're about, part of it is like the barricades of the world being like, hey, yes, I can make this shot. That doesn't mean that's the best shot for what this team needs from me.
Yeah.
Right. Or if I'm and that applies to Juwan too, right? Like, yes, you maybe shoot it a little bit better at home. Is that the best thing your team needs from you?
Like sometimes I think Bryce just has to be willing to go get fouled.
Yeah.
You know, like he's one of those guys, and he's such a good foul shooter.
Yeah, if he should shoot 8 to 10 free throws a game.
And it can minimum.
Yeah, like bare minimum.
Like
he's got to go get it.
Just get fouled. And what it does is it lets over time stuff like that is demoralizing.
That's exactly the word I was going to use, because you understand that you can't stay in front of him without fouling.
Yeah.
And then and then he gets by you more. But to the other thing that made the alarm bells go off in my head, so you're talking about kind of this, and people think it's overrated, but kind of this mentality of like, just get back up, be the first one up, it's not just
it ain't overrated
for them, although it is for them too, but it's also for you. If you keep getting up, you convince yourself you're okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's as much internally as externally, but it matters externally too, because it made me think that is super, super random. I'm a weird, like, George Foreman, Muhammad Ali fan. Mm-hmm. And there's a fight in the rope-a-dope fight. He keeps George Foreman does this great interview where he keeps saying that Muhammad Ali is sitting on the ropes and just getting pummeled, right? And he keeps asking him, "Is that all you got, George? Is that all you got, George?" And at a certain point, George literally thinks to himself,
he caved. He's like, "This man ain't human."
He said, "Yeah, that's about it."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? That's a real thing. Like if that's happening to George Foreman, like one of the best boxers and one of the best athletes in one of the toughest sports of all time, in boxing, against one of the best of all time, if that can happen to him, then it can certainly happen to a basketball team, right?
I told our guys, regardless, this goes all the way back to 05, and now it's come so far with like the mental approach to the game. Mm-hmm. Just been around a lot of other smarter people that we do this thing called a power pose or whatever, and the gist of it is you don't show fatigue. Mm-hmm. And I would always say, like coaching, and Alvin would do this in practice too with hoops and stuff. When you get back, when you sprint back, and they can see your eyes, there's just something about how that wears on teams that want to push it down your throat.
100%.
Right? Or when you don't show you're tired. My favorite is even when we muddle huddle as a defense, I'm always like, hey, let's get the call in so we're ready. Mm-hmm. There's just something about when other teams break the huddle
and you're
already ready to go.
I mean,
there's something about Christian was really, really good at this. Mm-hmm. Like if he would get knocked on his rear end, you watch him hop up off the ground. Mm-hmm. Like he would just, I coached a guy, Jason Martin. He was never going to be the last one on the ground. Mm. And the more people you play against that are like that, it just does something to you over time. Mm. And the crowd was lit, right? They're super engaged. And then like guys will get on the floor or they'll get knocked over, and it's like ride that energy that you're getting in the
use it.
Get up.
Use it.
Those are the kinds of things that demoralize teams on the road that aren't sure whether they should be there.
Another example, weirdly enough, boxing again. The exact moment Deontay Wilder's career ended? When Tyson Fury came back from the dead.
Yeah.
He was never the same after that because the dude got up.
Like, what the?
That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. Matt Coatney up next here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Prince out of the key with 3, with 2. She fires one up and nails it. Disley for 3. Get in there, you betcha. How was that not a foul? 1 second to go at the buzzer of Bolter to tie it. Huskers win! Huskers win! Bench going crazy. Huskers get their first win in 6 years in Iowa.
Wrapping up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We are joined now by Matt Coatney, the play-by-play voice for Nebraska women's basketball, amongst various other duties around the university. What's up, Matt?
Man, I don't know who you played there, but that sounded like a pretty exciting win over Iowa. You guys make me sound good.
I think it was Ben McLaughlin.
Well, Benny Mack is a fun guy to work with. Man, maybe he rubbed off on me. Thanks for playing that, guys. Thanks for having me on.
So I'm a huge fan, Coach, and we get along well. But I am very mad at you for getting Benny in my head. I feel like he's too old for me to refer him to him as Benny. But you've like burned that into my head. It's like, I got to think of something different. I can't call another grown-up Benny. But you make it work.
Well,
that's the code effect.
Here's the thing. You and I have been around sports our whole life, and you're not really part of a sports team unless you have a nickname. I've been called Coatman forever. Plus, I was in the Navy. You can't be in the Navy without a nickname. And on our football broadcast, I'm like, I got to call him something. And my youngest son's name's Ben. Yep. And but Benny Mack just seems to work. Kind of like it kind of reminded me of Bernie Mac back in the day. Maybe that's why I didn't have a problem with it.
They have they do have a lot of similarities.
Yeah, I could see Ben McLaughlin playing that role in Ocean's 11. Absolutely.
There you go, Coach.
Getting his nails done at a nail salon in Amsterdam. That's Ben McLaughlin all day.
And I hate the fact that you actually have a real job and you got the meeting coming up because we could do this, but we talked to Amy yesterday, and she said something interesting about like kind of the practice routine and freeing people up to kind of be who they are. You're watching this team, Coach, and it truly is next person up, but that's not by coincidence, right? That has to be intentional with the way she sets up practice. You don't build this kind of depth without empowering your players, right?
You are spot on, DB. When I first started watching Amy 9 years ago, and it became clear to me that she was going to play everybody, there was a part of me that thought that's not going to work in this league. You're going to have to narrow it down to a rotation of about 6 or 7, and she hasn't. She's very comfortable with who she is, and where that really emerges and helps your team is when you lose a Natalie Potts, when you lose an Allison Widener. While it sounds like next man up, it's not so much with this team. It's just, we keep moving on. And you look at the contributions of Jessica Petrie, who is now emerging into really a solid player that teams have to put near the top of their scouting report, because he's doing things like coming off the bounce with authority. We knew she could step outside, hit the three, but her rebounding has really, really improved. So you could say next man up, but man, on this team, you're not going to get any cobwebs underneath your seat. I mean, you're going to be out there playing, and yeah, practice is fun to watching the rotations, because nobody is standing around, no doubt about it.
Matt, we were talking, as DB said, with Coach Williams yesterday, and we asked her about kind of the losing streak about a month ago. And, she gave a very coach answer, which I appreciate, right? But if you're sitting there and you're watching that 3-game streak against Georgia Tech, UCLA, USC, what are you thinking in that moment about?
I was with you real time, Coach. This is hilarious.
About what is happening with that team and what the rest of the season holds. And the reason I'm asking that
those
is
teams were good.
They're really, really good. But the reason I'm asking you that is I feel like there's maybe a little existential crisis on the men's side right now as well. So, what were you thinking in that moment that can maybe give a little therapeutic session to some of our listeners?
Well, DB knows. It was no surprise to me that the Huskers went 0-3. I was hoping they could pick off one of those wins.
Yep.
Georgia Tech, probably the most underrated team in the country. And they were a top 20 team when we went down there. And the Huskers were right in that game, but those two freshmen just absolutely killed Nebraska. And then, USC has Juju Watkins, and they're not even the best team in their town, okay? They're ranked fourth in the country. I mean, you think about that. You're ranked fourth in the country. You got Juju Watkins. And by the way, you're the B team in Los Angeles. UCLA is as good of a team as I've seen up close in my almost 40 years in women's basketball. So, was hoping to go at least 1-2. But what I really hope is that our team didn't look at that and think, well, there's a big problem here. I said if those 3 games got spread out between November and March, no one would really think anything about it. It's just the way the schedule felt. And, I even asked Amy on a pregame show, I said, is there a danger here that your team, kind of has a mental approach problem here? And she didn't think they would. And then they knocked off 20th ranked Michigan State, and they went on the winning streak. Now, I would just say to Fred Hoiberg and the guys is that, play the opponent on the floor, not the opponent in your head.
That's it.
Because, you're not that far away. This league is so tough on the men's and women's side that 1 or 2 baskets is the difference every time. And I mean, you got to win. You got to win every possession, especially late. And if you do that, they could go on a winning streak here pretty quickly, and then everybody forgets about the 5-game losing streak.
That familiar voice you hear is Mr. You Betcha. It's Matt Coatney. Coat, I asked Coach Will about the schedule. I think it's kind of cool, and I don't know how feasible it is across the board or other sports or whatever, but it presents some unique challenges, but it's very balanced in that it's round robin outside of playing Iowa twice. When you can play 10 and it's a new scout every night, I kind of think that's an advantage for how Coach Williams and this staff like to coach. You think, is it pretty cool for you to one and done for this schedule across the board for the women's hoops?
You mean as a broadcaster?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Your preparation is a little difficult. There aren't any repeats except for Iowa.
Yeah, no, I'd like to play Penn State 18 times. If we're talking about these things, I mean, I know it really is. I will tell you this: there's not a better coaching staff after they've seen a team 3 or 4 times than Amy Williams. What she's got to do, she is so in tune with what a team does. You take a look at her success against Brenda Freese in Maryland. You take a look at her success against Iowa. She's won 2 of the last 3 games against Iowa, and the only loss was in overtime in the Big Ten title game. So, if Amy's got a scout down on you and they only play you 1 time a year, advantage Nebraska every time. And that has shown through the years. She's very, very good once she has a real sense of what you're trying to do year after year after year.
Matt, when you're looking at, you mentioned that UCLA is one of the best teams you've seen in person. I want to get another comparison from you, and I want it to be on Britt Prince. When you've seen a lot of really talented freshmen either play for Nebraska or against Nebraska, you don't have to give me a ranking or anything, but how does Britt Prince measure up what you've seen so far?
Playmaker, and the closest I could give you at Nebraska, and I'm going to try to give you another point guard, is Lindsey Moore.
Oh, good pull.
Lindsey Moore is like my third daughter, and her first year, she didn't score a lot because she was on a team that was the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament and the Big 12 champion. But she could score. She realized she had to do what she had to do to make the team successful, and she did a great job delivering the ball to Kelsey Griffin and Bonnie Turner and that group. Britt Prince is now determined with Natalie Potts out, and now that she's not a 13th grader, she's a true freshman. She's been around a little bit. And with some impetus from her coach that you need to be more involved in rebounding, you're seeing Britt Prince be a 5-tool player here. And I think Britt didn't like a lot of the conversation about her defenses behind her offense because she's got high hands and active hands, and she had a career-high 6 steals against Iowa. She's becoming the full package, and she realizes, look, I need to be on, and I need to make plays. I've interviewed her twice in the last 2 games post-game, and I've told her, playmakers make big plays, and that's how you win road games, and you've made big plays. So I would compare her to Lindsey Moore, because Lindsey Moore, as a freshman, always made the right play to put Nebraska in a position to win, and that's what Britt Prince is doing right now.
Coach, it's a really talented league, obviously, but it does have a lot of good freshmen. You saw 3 playing in Iowa, and they're littered across the conference. If you're going to give an X factor going forward for this team, and a team that is built on depth, who do you like to kind of keep an eye on that could play a pretty pivotal role that may not be pinging on the radar currently?
Oh, Amaya Hargrove, no doubt about it. This is a freshman from a small town in Illinois. His father played for Chan Gailey at Georgia Tech and played in the NFL. You take a look at her DB, and I salivate that Matt Rule might, I get afraid he might come off and pick her off to go play weak side linebacker. I mean, she has all kinds of athleticism. When you look at the win at Iowa, no fear, free throws late. She stuck a 3 to kind of break an Iowa run, but her rebounding.
She plays with some joy too.
She is, and here's the other thing: her blood pressure is low. She is. The moment is not too big for her, but she has a nose for the ball. You can teach boxing out, you can teach positioning, but sometimes it just wants to. And her joy for playing basketball comes through in rebounding. Look for Amaya Hargrove to really, you want to be an X factor. That's who I'm looking at down the stretch.
Always a treat, Coach.
That's Matt Coatney, play-by-play voice for Husker women's basketball. We appreciate it, Matt. We'll talk to you later.
And I enjoyed this. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Matty.
That's Matt Coatney. We'll be back. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, presented by Centris Federal Credit Union. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. Here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Good talking to our friend Matt Coatney there. Appreciate him joining us on the show.
I love the whole do you, not what's going on around you, for because the women's basketball team is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Of that, and he and I talk. So, and I remember that stretch coming off of the left coast, and I mean, I'm like, hey man, like
that is the major difference in what's happening with the men's team and the women's team. Is like those were some of the best teams in the country.
Yeah, they were incredible,
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, nothing like playing 3 or 4/5 of the all Big Ten conference team and in one weekend, and I was like, oh, that's a fantastic point there.
It's a little rough out here.
But I do like the sentiment where, like, Nebraska's got to maximize within for this basketball team, because I'm 100% with you. I'm surprised you just like freely said it when you said they're better than this 5-game
Yeah,
skid.
no, they really,
and that's how that's how they got to look at it.
They are, because I mean, I've seen this team be good. Like I know it's in there, right? It's not going to come easy.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's the difference. I think that's the difference with a lot of teams, right? A lot of these teams that we look at and they're like, oh, they're pretty talented. What's going on there? Whether it's in Indiana, whether it's a Rutgers, whether it's Nebraska, right? And I look at them and I go, okay, we've seen this team be good, but when it comes to these types of situations, when you get into conference play, when you get onto these road games, when you get into a little bit of a skid, you being as good as you can be doesn't come as easy as it did earlier, right? That's the thing that I think that's the mistake we make when we say, oh, this team's not very good. And I do the same thing. When I'm being emotional about a team, I'm like, oh, they're just not very good. Or, oh, I think they might suck or whatever, right? I get emotional about a team as a fan, and but the difference isn't really, is this team good or is this team bad? It's how hard does this team have to work to be as good as they can be? Yeah. Because some teams, it does come a little bit easier. Some teams, you do have more margin for error. This Nebraska team is not one of those teams. Like, if you want to complain about the roster, be like, well, if they had more talent, their margin for error would be greater. Sure, some of that's true. But we've seen this roster be good. Like, as much as I bemoaned the Creighton team this year, which I still, they're not my favorite Creighton team to watch, but that's fine. They're a pretty good basketball team. Mm-hmm. Nebraska pretty well dominated that basketball team, right? Like, so I know it's in there against good competition. We've seen it. But I don't know that they understand. You talk about competitive endurance all the time, right? I don't know if they understand how to endure long enough to be good. That's the thing we don't know. And then and if they don't, they're going to look bad.
It's funny. It's a weird analogy just because basketball did go to the postseason last year, and so you think they would be riding a little bit of momentum, but maybe their equivalent to the analogy I'm getting ready to give is they haven't won a NCAA tournament game.
Sure.
But it reminds me a little bit of Nebraska football, where you cave, you kind of give in to the all the stuff that's going on around you about what you haven't been, and it just creeps into the frontal lobe. And I just wonder,
you're resigned to who everybody else says you are.
Yeah, and how do you – but should this team be like that, given the fact that they are just coming off the – no, you say that freely, and I'm with you. I want to be like, you know what?
They shouldn't be like
I want to ride with you there, but I think there's still this – there's this sentiment that surrounds the basketball program where they're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop.
That's true. That's true.
Like we were just waiting to come unhinged after the start. Mm-hmm. We were.
You're right. You're right.
And
you're right. It is very similar to the football sentiment. We're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, right?
So it's like at some point, can you just hunker down and free yourself from that? We talk about it pretty flippantly.
I mean, they have to. That's their only option, right? They have two options. They either free themselves.
It's clearly harder than we think.
It's very easy to identify. It's very hard to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Simple versus easy?
Yes. It's a simple versus easy. It's a simple thing. It is not easy.
Right.
The answer is very simple. Yes, you have to free yourself from that. How do you do it? I don't effing know. I have no idea. Right? So that's the trick.
The only thing that I know how to do that I think works in a situation like that is to stay in the moment.
Sure. Yeah.
It really is. But if you are, do you know the only there was not, and again, in a 5-point game, maybe this doesn't seem like a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know that there's only one player last night, one player that was double digits to the good in plus minus?
Mm.
One.
Who's that?
On the entire floor.
For Nebraska?
On the entire
for either team.
On the entire
floor.
Wow.
Who?
Take a stab.
I'm just going to do this because I'm a homer. St. Thomas.
Close. He was at 9. But there were 2 on SC's team with 9.
Yates.
Yates was the other.
Yep.
Very nice.
Who's the guy that hit all 12? The guy that hit all the threes.
You're on the wrong team.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying.
Jawan?
No. Jawan amazingly was -7.
Oh.
Only one.
If only they had made
not only was he the highest in the game, he was the only double digit on the floor.
If only they had Mason Miller.
Funny you bring up Mason Miller. Who's the Mason Miller equivalent that I gave him to you a couple weeks ago? They guard him like a shooter.
Oh, Esijan.
Yep.
Yeah. I get it.
They lost by 5.
Yeah.
Esijan is +12. Not only is he clearly the highest, there's only one other positive for Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
One in the whole plus minus.
Yeah.
Who was that guy?
The other positive for Nebraska?
Correct.
Okay, if you're losing, it's Andrew Morgan.
Yes. So go ahead and give me the eye roll.
I mean, he had 2 points.
I get it. This is what I'm saying.
But
I like that. I'm going to play because I know why you say that. You're going to be like a lot of Nebraska fans, and I'm not calling you a Nebraska fan. I'm just saying, like,
sure.
They're going to look at it how you just did.
So the reason I said him was, if you got a positive plus minus and you lose, you didn't play starters minutes, right? So I thought, okay,
that's the easy. Okay.
Generally,
I'm listening. That's the easy way to explain it.
And so I went, okay, because I mean, just math wise, right? You probably weren't going to play a ton of minutes in a loss if you're positive plus minus. Mm-hmm. So I go, okay, I know Andrew Morgan only played like 15 minutes. They generally do play pretty well.
Funny, he played 14.
They generally do play pretty well when he's on the floor. So
was it a heel issue or should he be playing more?
He should take all of Mia's minutes.
Okay, but I said that to you the other day, and you literally want to fight me.
Not over Mia. I don't like
Morgan.
Oh, What I said to you was that he's not going to be.
I was pretty mad too, by the way.
I know you just slapped my hand.
Not hard.
It stung a little.
Sorry.
You got that wrist action. No, here's my issue with Morgan, and I'm glad you're bringing this up because it's my issue.
It's important because you have to.
No,
my
it
point
is.
is
It
you got to
is
work
important.
within the confines of the roster.
Right. No, you do. Right. And that's what I want to say because we talk about Nebraska's roster in a way sometimes that isn't accurate. And not just like, oh, they're good or they're bad. But I mean, we talk about guys either stepping up or doing X, Y, or Z. Andrew Morgan is a nice ball player. But the reason I kind of eye roll at Andrew Morgan is because this is his 4th year playing Division I college basketball.
I understand.
No, hold on. It's his 4th year playing Division I college basketball.
Hold on.
You just wait a second. This is 4th year playing Division I college basketball. He was about a 10-point-a-game scorer at North Dakota State. I can't imagine he's going to be a lot more than that playing in the Big Ten. He's not a developmental guy. He's I can give you everything I've got guy, and he's going to have flashes where he's really good.
You're missing the point.
You can't count on him to become someone he hasn't been.
You're missing the point.
All right, you tell me
I'm
the
not
point.
asking him to go for 17 a night.
What are you asking him?
I'm saying let's play to what our strengths are, and maybe we need to feature him more.
Agreed.
It doesn't mean he's pumping out 18 a night.
Fair.
Sometimes he just needs more touches.
Agreed.
Sometimes you just have to play through him. Sometimes he has a very good matchup. And the other thing about that is it drives me crazy when people say, well, this is who he's always been, or this is who she's always been, or sometimes situationally when you put other people, when you mix and match, that's really the beauty of either managing, coaching, or parenting.
You can get better results than you would expect.
Because as a parent, I'm never going to say to myself, God dang it, this dude has been an F student his entire life, so therefore only expect Fs. So that's not ever going to be in my.
I understand that, but there's also a practicality of it with athletics.
100%.
Like,
but guess what the benefit is that you get with athletics that you don't get as a parent?
What's that?
You get to do things with multiple different people.
Sure.
So therefore, the game within the game is playing within the confines of all the other movable parts.
Sure.
Like that's the beauty of coaching.
Here's the thing. If Andrew Morgan has been, and Andrew Morgan's probably a bad example because I think he's better than, and I think they do need to play him more because I think he's a better version of what they need.
And maybe it's not necessarily.
Right. So I'm not talking about him specifically. This is kind of in the team in general, right? So if you've got an F student, right, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, I think he's more capable than this. Maybe you get him to a C. That's great. But he might just be a C. That's my issue with, and again, Morgan's a bad example, and it's not really what you were saying, but it kind of fit into what I hear a lot of Nebraska fans say, is there's some of these guys, most of these guys on the roster are juniors and seniors. The only guy that plays that's not in at least his 3rd year of eligibility is Berke. That's the only guy that regularly plays. He's a sophomore. Everybody else has been doing this for a while, right? So we have a pretty good idea what they are. Now, listen, you might be able to maximize that, but you can't expect them to be in something entirely different. That very rarely happens. You might be able to take them from a D- to a C+, but they're not going to be an A.
So I think if you're grading on a curve, which we agree that that's what coaching is.
Sure.
It's grading on a curve.
Yeah.
Right? Because your A might not be my A. It depends on the curriculum and the program I'm in.
Yeah.
The equivalent of the curriculum is the program that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not a – so like if you're at NDSU and you're a B, what's it take to get that C in the Big Ten with a little more rigor?
Sure.
Well, that's what I have to figure out as a coach.
Fair.
That's what I'm talking about when I say you have to play the game within your own roster construction. And we're seeing it right down the street. So it is possible.
It is.
It is possible to get people to do different things in a different framework of what we're accustomed to see. Because this clearly is not the same. This isn't I'm not watching Arizona State and Creighton as the same player.
Sure.
I'm not.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm not. So I'm not going to resign myself to what I had seen on film. I'm going to look at it as what his skill sets are relative to what this particular team needs.
Sure.
You can do that with any team and any guy or gal that you're coaching.
I agree.
So just because somebody has been something someplace else, that doesn't – maybe you're not going to get Ulis to go for 9 a night. Maybe you're not. You're not.
Probably not.
But if you like what he does, handling the ball and his decision making, then everything you do has to be predicated off of playing to his strengths. If you can't do that, then you can't play that guy.
Correct. Yes.
So you don't have to resign yourself to just saying, well, this is my roster. This is what we're going to be. Like the challenge is how am I maximizing what I think they can really do well and do more of it. And I get it. The eye roll for Morgan is he's not going to be an 18-a-night guy. He's not. But what he does do.
But he still might be your best option.
And he commands presence.
Sure.
And he's going to get fouled. And, if you're.
Maybe he brings you a little toughness.
And was that not kind of what got Nebraska through weathering that run that Maryland made? Just keep giving him. He wasn't scoring anymore.
Not a ton, no. He had a little spurt, but that was.
And it was early.
Yeah.
But late, do you know why him touching the ball late mattered? Because he allowed you to collapse.
Yeah.
You had to pay attention to him.
You had to honor him.
So as long as you can play like that, it's the Mason Miller thing that drives you crazy, right? If you have to play him a certain way, then the rest of the team wins.
Here's I'm glad you brought up Mason Miller because I think there is an analogy here, right? Part of and we're sort of talking about the same thing, but in different ways. You're looking at it like a coach, and I'm looking at it the way fans do, right? Is a lot of times you want to see, I'm getting flashes of this out of a guy. Let's try and develop him over the course of the season so I can get that all the time, right? My point is with Nebraska's roster and how they choose to put it together with older guys, that's less likely because the older you are, the more likely it is that you're kind of just who you are. Now you can be put in better positions to be successful, and that doesn't mean you can't be better than you were at your last stop. Jemiah Neal's a good example of that.
Yes and no. So, would you be saying to me, okay, DB, you want Mia to be more assertive. You want him to be tougher. Maybe this is just who he is.
That's part of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Like there's, especially on a mentality thing, because honestly, I think it's easier to develop the basketball skills for a lot of guys than it is to develop the right mentality. Because if you're Braxton Mia and you've kind of played like this your whole life, that's really hard in terms of.
So what help me here? Because
Sure.
I'm not going to pile on Mia and I'm not going to pile on Berkey. I use those as examples of what I'm talking about, going back to what Kobe was talking about with what we heard last night in the press conferences when they talk about quote unquote toughness.
Sure. So I'll use some Creighton guys as an example
what if those kinds of things, what if part of the coaching in the roster means putting you through some of that just for the sake of coming out of the other side? Because there's power in it.
There is. Here's my issue, though. Not everybody comes out the other side.
We were so mad
at
football. Man, I'm tired of the older guys.
Sure.
Get them out of there. And Coach Rule would say, man, I'm telling you, there's something about coming out of the other side of this from a perseverance standpoint. It frees up the younger guys. It gets the monkey off the back of the older guys. Like, we just kind of have to go through this process. And it was driving us crazy, right?
Sure.
Now, we don't know what kind of dividends it's going to pay, but he was right. What you and I would debate every other day almost, and everybody else around the state was, at what cost are you willing to keep going through this?
Is it worth it?
Right? So we went through that.
Is coming out the other side, whatever you get from that, worth what you're going through now?
So, what if there is this thing that's happening in practice, which, 99.999% of us don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Where there's this push through toughness thing that we think if you could just crack that code will correlate into getting over the hump in some of these games. Because why else do the players keep saying it? And who are they talking to? Who? They keep saying this.
Calls come from inside the house.
It has to be.
Calls come from inside the house.
So who are we? If we could figure out specifically, and then they get it to actually happen, that may be the corner that the program turns.
Sure, it might be. But I also understand that I'm going to take, it's kind of funny. I would rather take my chances with Morgan than I would with Mia at this point, because I think Morgan has more of that figured out than Braxton Mia does at this point. So, I don't feel it's necessary when I've got other options to continue to try and go through it when a guy hasn't really shown me that he's willing to. And so, and I don't know if that's the case with me or not. That's just an example. But The other part of this is when you bring in older guys to your program, you limit your time frame to try and develop that as well. You do. Like it
depends on what you're dropping them into.
It does, but if you're dropping into a program that needs to turn the corner, not having enough time to develop some of those things in guys can be detrimental if they don't have it already. And that can be really tough, right? Part of the reason that I want to see Fedor over Mason Miller is I feel like I have a pretty good idea of who Mason Miller is at this point. I don't know what Fedor is at this point yet, and I'd like to see that play out. Like, I have a pretty good feeling. We've seen it before where Mason Miller can go stretches without playing very much, and then he plays a lot, and he can kind of endure that, and he's going to be about who he is. That's one of the good things about Mason Miller is you play 3 minutes one game, he'll play 18 minutes the next game. He's still basically going to be Mason Miller. But it'd be silly for me to expect Mason Miller to be more than that. It's not silly of me at this point to expect that maybe Fedor can be more than that. That's the difference between a guy that's in his third or fourth year in a program and a guy that's in his first year in a program, is there's a different level of discovery with that player's game where you've got a lot of information about Mason Miller at this point. We don't have that much information on Fedor Zugic. You have a lot of information on Braxton Mia. You also have a lot of information on Andrew Morgan. I like the information I have on Andrew Morgan better, right? That's not to say Braxton Mia can't be useful for you. That's not to say that you can't try and still help him get through the other side. But at this point, in a 5-game losing streak, and you got to start winning games ASAP, I'm going to go with the guy who information I have on currently I like better, and not try and count on a thing I've never seen out of the other guy.
Boy, I don't know.
You got to win some now. That's part of the problem, right? Is while you're trying to go through it, if you're Fred Hoiberg, you got to get some wins now.
You saw pieces of Chucky Hepburn.
Sure.
That you're like, okay, I like this, this, and this. But it's something completely different in Louisville.
Yeah, the situation has totally changed.
You're seeing it with Neal, right?
100%.
Different.
Yeah.
Now, I will entertain what you're saying. Like, I mean, Caleb Love in Arizona was Caleb Love in Carolina.
Yeah.
So, sure.
AJ Storr, same guy everywhere he's been, right?
So, sure. Generally, is Mayo?
No.
Okay. So, as a coach,
sure,
it's the same thing that I used to say about, like, not resigning yourself just because you're getting a guy and he's always been this. The coach in you or the teacher in you says, you're in my classroom now. This is my environment. Like, I can do better. I know. Listen, Lil Johnny, I know you're coming to me.
I get it.
I'm looking at your caseload. Your caseload says this.
Yeah, your notes are terrible.
But with this, you can be this.
Here's the problem, though.
No, hang on.
All right.
Because what I'm telling you is with all these individual different cases, you're getting something. You're capable of getting something different.
You are. But there's a part of being a teacher and a coach, and this is probably one of the things I wasn't very good at, is there's a part of you that has to be necessarily a little delusional. A little bit. Because here's the thing. A lot of those Johnnies are never going to turn it around. A lot of them. Like, their case notes are their case notes for a reason. A lot of them don't turn it around. And if you're a coach and you've got to start winning games now, Bill Self has a lot more leeway than Fred Hoiberg does. Like, Bill Self can endure figuring out who AJ Storr is and who Zeke Mayo is and whatever, right? He's got a lot more leeway because of his track record. Fred Hoiberg needs to start winning games again immediately. Like, this is getting in a real dangerous place for this program to keep this thing back on track.
How soon we forget that we were just talking about Coach Hoiberg's accolades.
Oh, I'm not talking about firing him.
No.
Yeah, okay.
The developmental prowess through last March or March of 2023. And the win percentage from a year and a half ago up until before the 5-game streak.
I get it.
Do we?
I do. But you also have to look at who are the guys on my roster right now and who currently, in their current version of themselves, gives me the best chance to win. Because that's, like, there's sometimes you can afford to be a little more macro, and sometimes you have to look at the game right in front of you and say, hey, who gives me a better chance to win tomorrow? That's where Nebraska is. They need the guys to give them the best chance to win tomorrow. Because they're not in a place where they've got the leeway. And this is the argument people made against me with Greg McDermott. Greg McDermott had the leeway to kind of wade things out a little bit and see, okay, I think this guy gives me the best version of himself later down the road. Fred Hoiberg in Nebraska, they need to start winning games tomorrow.
I got some things for that.
We can get to that. That's DB. I'm Ravi, Lulla. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back. Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior Stage and brought to you by our friends at Centris Federal Credit Union. Make sure you get to centrisfcu.org to check out all they have to offer. It's still January. It's not too late to make some resolutions, especially about your finances. Centris has you covered, whether it's just regular checking and savings, car loan, mortgage, whatever you need. Centris has you covered. Go talk to the experts at Centris Federal Credit Union, centrisfcu.org, federally insured by NCUA, equal housing lender. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla, having a little spirited discussion both on and off the air.
Yeah.
About kind of the way we view all of athletics and sort of the world a little bit. And I think that's where there's this sort of fundamental difference between us, right? In how we view coaching, how we view players, how we view these teams, right? Because kind of just to reset here, we're talking about Nebraska, Creighton, Nebraska football a little bit as well. And as a coach, you brought a question to me, and that was, would you rather have the guy that gives you some flashes?
Now this is,
of brilliance or what you need from him, whatever it is, right? Or would you rather have the guy that you just know, yeah, he's not that.
One way or the other.
Yeah. And I said I would definitely rather have the guy that I know, because then I can make a decision. I can make a decision about what I need to do moving forward. If I know, good or bad, I would rather have that every day of the week. And it seems like you're not sure.
Well, I think the way that we talk about it in terms of progress and development, whether it's Nebraska football or Creighton basketball or Nebraska basketball or Iowa or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure in coaching that you're always afforded the luxury of clarity.
You're very often not.
Like
that's why I value it so much when I do get it.
So it's not as linear.
Sure.
As kind of what we would
boil it down to
off air,
yeah.
Right? So it's like, if I know if somebody shows me that they're capable of something, and I come with my inherent traits as a coach,
mm-hmm.
if I'm Coach Ferentz or Fleck or Rule or Mack or Coach Hoiberg, and I'm coaching,
mm-hmm.
like that's what I enjoy. That's what I do. That's who I am. So at what point will I say, will I just? Because even when it's obvious, it's sometimes not always so obvious to coaches.
Sure. Yeah, that's why I say they're necessarily a little delusional, because they have to, in order to be.
But we're operating under the assumption that they're probably, most coaches are like that, right?
No, yes. I'm saying you have to be. To be any good at this, you have to be. And
so sometimes we look for
you have
those things.
Yeah, and you have to.
And I told you off air, it sounds a little bit like a quarterback that came over from Arizona State.
Mm-hmm.
Right, where he shows you just enough to think to yourself, playing into that delusion where it's like,
oh, I can fix that.
I can fix this.
100%. Every coach in the world worth their salt thinks, oh, I can fix that guy, right? But most of those guys don't get fixed. That's my point. And we look at the examples of, oh, well, it worked with this guy and it worked with that guy and it worked with this other dude.
I mean, kind of.
But for them, like, if you want to play the numbers, you have way more guys that fall by the wayside because they never figure it out than ones that's why the ones become stories. The guys that overcome and the guys that have slow starts and the late bloomers and the guys that figured it out late. That's why they're ingrained in our memory, because they are rare. Most of them fall by the wayside. Like, most Josh Hamiltons end up in drug rehab forever and never figure it out. Like, that's an extreme example, but that's a reason that matters. It's because he's basically the only one that figured it out late in his life, right? Most of the time, that person just is a drug addict for the rest of their life, or maybe they end up selling insurance. Like, best case scenario, they get off the drugs, they have a normal person job, right? You don't generally see the extreme, oh, I'm really, really struggling here. I can't figure it out. I can't get my head on straight, to boom, superstardom, right? That generally doesn't happen. And so if I'm a coach, and I get it, most coaches are not granted much clarity at all, right? That's why it's hard. But if I can get clarity on something, I will absolutely take it over having. Now, if I believe that clarity or not, that's the other question, because that's where a little bit of that delusion comes in. And a lot of times, like you said, coaches are the last to know because they want to believe for so long. And that's a good quality in a coach. It is. Because if you don't believe in those guys, you're going to miss the ones that you need to get. But sitting here not being in that situation and not having to coach this team,
I'm just telling you, I just don't think. I mean, it's a developmental program.
Not Nebraska basketball isn't. You can't bring in guys this old all the time and call yourself a developmental program. You can't.
But that's what they're doing, though.
That's what they're trying to do. But I'm telling you, that doesn't work. You can't bring in guys for 1 or 2 years all the time and be a developmental program. At some point, you have to. Who are
you bringing in where you're saying to yourself, okay, this guy's ready-made?
I'm not talking about ready-made guys. I'm talking about younger guys to develop. So
what difference does the age make?
Because you have less time to do it.
No, I understand that, but
that's the difference.
Listen to what I'm telling you.
I'm trying.
So if you're doing enough to get by minimum level.
Okay.
So you're bringing in additions that still fit the mold. I feel like there's so many overlapping areas with Nebraska basketball and Nebraska football where even when we talk about guys in the portal, it's still not really ready-made guys necessarily.
Sure.
There's still a developmental aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're older.
Some of them.
Okay, they're
I mean, 9 of their 14 guys, or 10 of the 16 guys out of the portal have multiple years left.
Okay,
yeah.
It doesn't mean like they haven't been in college 2 years
or
3 years.
I also think the timelines are longer in football. Like I think basketball is abbreviated.
Let's say you're right. Let's say you're 100% right that it's abbreviated. How do you explain what's gone on since March of 2023 at Nebraska with the ascension and wins and losses?
I think last year a lot more of this team was intact than it was this year. Like they replaced a lot of really important pieces from last year, right? Now,
Casey was pretty old, right? And he was Nebraska.
But he was there for 3 years.
He got better, right?
And he was there for 3 years.
But listen,
that matters.
Being in the same place?
I think so.
You still have to have it in you because a lot of times we run guys off.
Fair. That's fair. Like you do still have to have it in you. That's why I don't really want to write Bearkay off, even if he is frustrating to me sometimes. He's a guy that I think hopefully you can keep in this program for a couple more years. And if you can get him to play to his strengths, I think he can be really useful.
Like at what point should we be like, oh, you know what? What's the one thing I said about Bearkay since the minute he got here? Wait until Bearkay gets into what?
Elite shape.
I've said that for how many months?
All of them.
Okay. Did he ask out last night?
Yes.
So that has to be part. That has to be part of the message being delivered, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't. Like who is this team talking to with toughness?
They're talking to themselves. They're talking to themselves.
So there is still room for growth from a developmental standpoint, even with the old guys that you keep talking about.
Okay.
To allow
room for growth and actual growth, though, that's what I'm talking about.
No, you're talking about negotiating the time span, not the philosophy. Because you're not
the time span is in
the philosophy
integral to the philosophy.
The philosophy is still in place.
Right. And the longer time you have with guys, the easier it is to implement that philosophy. That's my point. It's really hard to implement that philosophy of being a developmental program on abbreviated time spans. Like, that's really challenging. And I don't know.
These guys haven't even been together a full season, though.
I know. And how many of these guys are going to be there next year? That's my point. My point is when you don't have guys together year over year, it becomes really, really hard to develop the things we're talking about, especially the intangible things. What did I say to Dean Marinas last night when he brought up
Nebraska's the only guy getting – Nebraska's the only guys that are taking guys that are going to always be who they have been?
But
is that what you want me to resign myself to?
No, but Nebraska you mentioned the ready-made guys. A lot of these other programs are getting ready-made guys.
Dude, you hated Neal. At least watching him.
I still don't necessarily enjoy watching him. His game drives me crazy a little bit. That doesn't mean there's not anything there. even though he does drive me crazy. I also don't expect him to be dramatically better. Like, he's better than I would have ever expected him to be.
He's dramatically
Yes,
better.
he's better than I ever would have expected him to be, but it's unreasonable for me to have expected him to get here, even though he did. Like, exceptions and playing the averages, like, we're talking about two different things here. As a coach, you want to coach to the exceptions. As somebody who's just watching, I kind of understand most of the time it's going to play to the averages.
Yeah.
That's the difference. That's DB. I'm Ravi. We'll be back with Brian Edwards. Get a little Vegas insight here on a Thursday on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Now, Vegas insider, senior handicapper, and fan of the cold Budweiser bottles, Brian Edwards.
It's got to be touchdown, touchdown, touchdown.
Brian Edwards.
I don't really love it.
Brian Edwards.
The way they're using the cream cheese to butter the bagel.
Brian Edwards.
I'm going with the cowgirl.
Here is Brian Edwards.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla, live here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We are joined now by our Vegas insider from Major Wager, Brian Edwards. What's up, B? Oh, we can hear you.
Hi, B. How we doing?
I don't know if he can hear us.
He's just fumbling with cords.
That's all right. We wouldn't be a Brian Edwards segment without a little technological difficulties.
How we doing, B?
I don't think he's got anything.
No, that's his. He's got a.
No, I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
I guess it automatically like mutes me right when I on the StreamYard when I come on. I have to maximize.
That's what I would mute me too. I wouldn't mute you, but I would definitely. I'm trying to deal with the coaching world problems and on local sports, and Ravi's giving me a headache, so you guys are going to have to bear with me. Hey, B, can you get this analogy? I told Ravi off air, I said, if you really want to know what's going on, we've been in these great debates all morning, and I said, in my head currently, it's like if somebody had like 6 buckets of paint and they just threw them all on the wall. In my head, I feel like I'm waiting for the colors just to kind of go down the wall. Like, just kind of settle into the mess that it's going to be, man. This losing skid for Nebraska basketball has got me shook. How are you this morning, man? Besides, your Gators are going to be preseason top 10 next year, so I love that Napier flag you've been flying down there in Destin. That's pretty cool that you've come around on Napier.
I don't know about that, but several things here. All right, and I'll never be able to say this again, and Damon and I have done radio more than a decade, and hopefully more than a decade to come. I've got more snow on the ground here in Florida than you do right now. I would make that bet.
Terrible. Like the South is like the South is like taking our snow removal people. Like they're relocating to other places in the country to help them out. Yeah, I'm dead serious.
I'll send you pictures after this interview.
I'm
being serious too. I mean, like 8 or so. I mean, I'll send you pictures. I'll text you pictures after this.
You have 8 inches of snow?
Yeah, they got a bunch.
At least I think Pensacola got 9.5. I'm an hour east of Pensacola. I saw they got 9.5. Like
I saw your fire department having a snowball fight. I didn't know it was that much.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'll send you a text. I am doing good, but I got Nebraska -1.5 live last night, so that was bad. I had Xavier +7.5 up by 10 at half. They lose by 8 in OT, and I had Georgia up 12 at half. I had them +1.5. It's tie game, 1.8 left. Arkansas makes 1 free throw, and then on the next free throw, the shooter rebounds his own miss and makes a shot at the buzzer to win by 3. But I faded the Canes again with Stanford, and I had a great night because that was my stud horse. I had Stanford first half game, team total over.
I told Ravi, so we're kind of on this Miami thing. Just one of the little inside jokes on this show. It's like Miami and Rutgers. We're always and kind of UCLA. Mm-hmm. But the inside joke is Miami is awful. And this started like a month ago when Florida State was getting a point against Miami in hoops. Yep. And Florida State rolled them by like 25. And we joked, I'm like, this team is awful. Like, how are they even favored? And so every day we watch Miami just get drubbed by like 40 or 30 or 50. And yesterday I said to Ravi, I go, what time is it again in Stanford? Because Miami's only getting 11. How is that not going to be free Cardinal? And we forgot all about it. And then to hear you say that this morning, it's like, yeah, like fade the Canes. They're miserable.
It was 21-3 out of the gate. They lose 88-51. SMU the other day was up 54-16 with like 2 minutes left in the first half. So they are in hotel rooms in the San Fran, Oakland area. I forget exactly where Palo Alto and Berkeley are related to those cities, but they're all right there together. They're in hotel rooms the next 2 nights, and then they play Cal, who beat FSU at home last night. Ken Palma has got it at 8. If it's 15 or less, I'll be on the Golden Bears. This team has quit, man. They don't even try. I caught on Sirius Radio. I got caught like 10 minutes of the SMU game with the Miami announcers Saturday afternoon. Oh my gosh, they were just killing them for lack of effort. It was wonderful.
So the other night when they lost, I don't know, it was 117-72 or something. You realize it was 60-26 at the half?
I just told you it was 54-16 before that. Miami made their last 4 shots of the first half. I wrote about it yesterday in my preview of Stanford.
I mean, we're just in this group text. It's it's little old media guys here in Nebraska just watching Miami randomly every game.
Just get hammered.
Auto fade Canes. Love it.
Okay, B, I've got another one for you on an auto play. All right, are you ready for this one? Kansas unders.
I don't think they played the one. Right?
Had it last night. Barely got there.
They're 2-16, I think, on the season on their over-unders. Brutal.
Yeah, it was 14 in a row until it went over Saturday.
Yep.
And it went over Saturday. It made it 14-2 overall, and it went under last night. So what you said, 15-2? Is that right?
2, yeah, 15-2 unders, 16-2, something like that on the unders.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
All right, let's start in football, because the longer this week has gone on, even with the Jalen Hurts thing, the less I feel like people like the Commanders. They haven't even done anything to kind of get the negative sentiment. It just feels like nationally they think
feels like they shouldn't really be here.
This one is over, man. Do you have any good values? Let's start with what you like in anything in the Chiefs or the Commanders and Eagles.
Yeah, I like the Commanders. And I've been betting them all year, but shame on me. I had Detroit in a money line parlay and did not do Washington last week. But, man, what a performance. And, yeah, I like them this week. And Philadelphia, obviously they've won, but they haven't looked very good, in my opinion, these last couple of games. And could have lost last week. But I like the Commanders. Now, they're 6 everywhere, but Westgate Superbook has 6.5. Maybe be patient and maybe hope, if you're not at the Westgate Superbook. At Westgate Superbook, I would just buy the 0.5 point to 7. Now, I've got some future tickets on Washington. Now, I lost some future tickets on Detroit last week, so I'll mention that. But I've got a 30-1 and 24-1 ticket on Washington to win the Super Bowl, and I've got a plus 950 to win it this week. So, small little pizza bets, not like huge money, but with the 24-1 and 30-1 payouts, that's really nice. And so, I need them to win outright, but I can't turn them down at plus 6 or 7. So I'm going Commanders, but I also want to do some Jalen props. So I did over, I think it was 44.5 last week, and he got it on that one play, or I think it was a 44-yard touchdown run on the 6th play of the game. Now, I guess he was limited in practice yesterday with a knee, and I guess it's put his prop, it's all the way down to 31.5. And then his anytime touchdown, which I think was minus 180-ish last week, is down to minus 125. He has scored a touchdown in 9 of the last 12 games and 13 total in the last 12 games. So I'm going to go Jalen anytime touchdown minus 125 and hope that knee is better. But, I think if his knee is only 85%, I still think I like it over 31.5,
But speaking of weird stuff where nothing's really happened to influence it, all of a sudden the Chiefs are kind of this lively underdog in terms of theory, even though the numbers it is not really an underdog. It's like, woe is the Chiefs. It doesn't even seem right with how much this team has won. But do you get that sentiment too?
Yeah, and I'm going to take it.
There's no fake Kansas City Chiefs fandom on the shoulder this week. The chip on their shoulder, I think, is well earned.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all over the Chiefs this week. It's my favorite play. So they're really 16-1 this year because, Mahomes and everybody sat out the regular season finale. They're 10-0 at home, and 6 of the 10 wins were over teams that made the playoffs. They beat the Texans twice, the Chargers, Broncos, Bucks, and Ravens. Okay, Mahomes has not had his best, stat season, but in the last 7 games, we're skipping the regular season finale because he didn't play. In his last 7 wins, 12 touchdown passes, no interceptions. The Chiefs have won 8 in a row in the playoffs, and in those 8 games, Mahomes 14-1 TDI-INT ratio. In his career in the postseason, 42-8 TDI-INT ratio, 5 rushing touchdowns, and 16-3 in those 19 career playoff games. 2 losses to Brady, 1 to Joe Burrow in overtime. And in the Mahomes era in Kansas City, in the playoffs specifically, 3-0 against the Bills. Mahomes, 8 touchdown passes without an interception and 1 rushing touchdown. I love the Chiefs.
That's our guy, B. Edwards, Vegas Insider, MajorWager.com. Brian, we appreciate the time as always. Good luck this weekend.
Thanks, fellas. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thanks, B.
That's Brian Edwards, our Vegas Insider.
The Dodgers and the Chiefs, man, the plucky underdogs.
Yeah, you got to root for them. They barely have any resources.
Whatever.
Always doing more with less.
Operation Paint Splotch.
You want to talk about maximizing a roster? Just really
zip it.
Got to appreciate that. It's they're basically the O2As out there. And
they never bring in any young guys. I don't get
DB.
it.
I'm Ravi Lulla. We will be back with Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7, coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, presented by Centris Federal Credit Union. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We are joined now by Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. What's up, Bruntz?
Hello.
Hello.
How we doing?
Hi, MB. What's up?
What's up? What's going on today?
Well, I mean, some may call it an argument.
Spirited.
No. You guys.
No. So there's like, I don't know, less than 6 degrees separation between. We're kind of on this thing. It started with me being mad at folks just taking like the low-hanging fruit and being mad about the roster versus me saying, you know what, I think they have to kind of figure out what's going on within the roster because they're not as bad as the 5-game losing streak. And we were also trying to figure out, why does a team that keeps talking about toughness, or who or what are they talking about, generally speaking, when guys always take the podium after the game and they talk about toughness? Like, where is that and how does it fit? And I'm just it's been downhill from there, Bruntzy. Ravi and I have not been on the same page at all.
Okay.
So I
That's
guess
what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we were talking about like how to get better within the individual particular roster, right? Can you have guys? Is it feasible, Bruntz, to have guys that have been a certain way, even when Nebraska inherited that, or went and got them, or since they've been here, or whatever, and expect them to act or do different things as a coach? The easy answer for me was just yes. But Ravi's trying to get me to resign myself to the fact that sometimes that's just how it's going to be.
Interesting.
I know, right? Because,
like, at what point do you say a guy is who he is? That's kind of where I'm like that, you know, because and DB brought up a good example of Jeff Sims from the football team, right? Is at a certain point you kind of have to pull the plug and just be like, this isn't getting any better. He was a turnover machine at Georgia Tech. That obviously hasn't gotten better at Nebraska. Like, at what point do you just say, hey, this ain't it? And I think we might be there with certain guys on the basketball team.
I don't know, though.
Who in particular, I guess, that changes my who are you thinking?
So I do think he's going to fight me on this, but I do think there's a difference between Mia maybe being who he is versus, let's say, Berke being who he is.
Yes.
What about, before I let you get into specifics, what about Morgan? Would you resign yourself to Morgan being who he is, or would you try to find?
That's not always a bad thing, by the way. Like, what Morgan is could be pretty positive.
Yeah, because I think they should do more of what Morgan already is within what they do.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead. The floor is yours,
so
MB.
Let's go back to Berke and Mia. I mean, it feels like you should be getting, like, Mia, you knew what you were getting. Like, you were getting a guy that was going to be was ideally going to protect the rim, was probably going to give you some dunks, not a ton offensively. And, you know, the thing that I've kind of wondered about, like, you had the injury to Rink, and I think that's caused, basically they don't have another Rink, and they don't have a big that they can, run the offense through as reliably as they did with him or even Derek Walker. And I think, you're asking Mia sometimes to do things that I don't know that he's comfortable doing or should be doing. So I don't know. I mean, I think with him, I think you knew what you were getting. I don't think that you were probably going to get a ton different from that. I mean, it felt like a floor and a roof situation being pretty similar in pretty similar spots. Berke, I don't know if it's needing to use him in different situations, if it's a role change or if something can kind of shake things loose there. But that one has surprised me a little bit, and I don't know that I'm willing to just say that's who he is. So maybe that's an area of improvement. But I mean, I think across the board, going back to your first kind of branch there, the toughness thing. I mean, it's a, like, the rebounding stuff that bothers me. Like, you know, the number of offensive rebounds that you've allowed during the stretch, that's bothered me. And that to me is always an issue of hustle and toughness and want to and all, whatever cliche you want to say. I mean, I guess I could go along with, well, you know, that's just who these guys are, but I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think that's there's enough guys on this team that have made winning plays at Nebraska that, you know, you can make that work. And so I don't know. I mean, I think it's, I guess I could go along with both of you a little bit. I mean, I think there's definitely areas on this team where you can improve significantly. And I do wonder if some guys shifting roles or kind of looking at your rotation a little bit differently, if that would help. But, you know, I do think that, you know, you kind of have to find those guys on your roster that you can improve and get more out of, because I'm kind of going both with mom and dad here on both situations. Like, I can see it. I can see your points, and I don't know that either of you is necessarily more right than the other.
So, okay, I want to go back to kind of this toughness thing, and I'm only staying with it because the players keep talking about it, right?
Fred does too.
I was gonna say your coach keeps talking about it. So, eye roll, something, nothing. Now this is like hokey DB coach, right? Where I'm like, hey, don't be the last one off the ground, or sometimes you got to foul a guy hard, or sometimes you can't be the last one off the ground, or if you get knocked over, like sprint back. Or you know, if I'm Juwan Gary and I'm supposed to be a tough guy, like I spend a lot of time out on the perimeter, right? Or if I'm Bryce Miller, wow, I felt like I needed to kind of throw you a bone there, Bruntz. If I'm Bryce, like sometimes it's just getting to the foul line, like willingness to get fouled, or if something is physical, that I'm the first one off the floor. Like if you say to me out loud that I'm a physical, tough-minded defensive team, and then 3 weeks later I don't seem to do anything very physical, or like maybe those are little things where you could really get better within the roster that you have that could pay big dividends. Is body language or willing to do stuff like that too hokey this or this late? It's not even that late. It's still January.
Yeah,
in the Big
Ten.
It's not late. Okay, in the Big Ten Conference. Like, is that?
No, I mean, I think that's you got to find the buttons to push on that, and I think sometimes, I mean, there's probably a flip side to this, but I mean, maybe in my simple mind, like if you've got a veteran team and a team that's kind of been, you know, guys have been through it. I mean, you should kind of expect that those types of things should kind of be there. You know what I mean? Like, you play enough college basketball, you kind of know what that looks like. You know, you're going to have to foul a guy hard. You're going to have to, you know, go to the line. You're going to have to, you know, get on the floor. I mean, I was listening to Fred's post game, and you know, that seems to be what he was pointing at, was like, look, like there's going to be 5 or 6 plays a game where you just kind of need to junkyard dog it a little bit, get on the floor, get a loose ball, grab a rebound, whatever. And, you know, during this stretch, a lot of those types of plays have not been going Nebraska's way. And
I could just see the crowd going crazy at time 2, 3, or 4 if guys just went to the rim with like reckless abandon or stood in and took one. Like, how do you let Claude kind of do what he did last night without giving it back to him? You know what I mean? It's like, and the crowd is built for that.
Yeah, no, it is. And you know, it's also getting to that point a little bit too, where I mean, you guys know how it is where you've lost a couple games. The kind of momentum starts going against you a little bit, and you can feel that tension. It's like a collective pucker, right? And I think that's crept in a little bit, and you got to find a way to get through that. I mean, and you're right. I mean, the crowd is the type where you get a Sam Hoiberg hustle play, they're going nuts for that. A guy, dives for something or gets a loose ball and makes a nice pass. I mean, they go crazy for that too. I mean, but you just have to find more of that, and you kind of need some of those plays to also be coming from your dudes.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at with it. I mean, it's great if a role player is doing it. You kind of need somebody. You need somebody over there to kind of set the tone a little bit, and I think that feels like it's been lacking. Is like who's going to be the one to kind of grab the yoke and start flying this plane now that it's in a tailspin here. And it's on those two veterans that you were really excited. I think that they were coming back. I mean, I think it's got to start with those two guys.
It's weird because it's a team. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Where, like, if I could bring any guy back from last year, it's not a guy that's going to help him offensively. It would be a guy like Alec, who, I mean, you could hit that guy in the face or he would get bumped. He'd still be the first one back down the court. Like,
he's a guy that drives opponents crazy. But not for any of the, like.
Yeah, I don't want points from him. Yeah. I just want a guy that's not going to stand for it. I think this is a team that needs a guy to just show, like, hey, if you said out loud this was our MO, then I'm going to then where is it, right? Like, that's the thing. I want the best example of what you told me we were out loud, and I think for this team, weirdly so, it would be a guy like Alec.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's something to be said for that. And I mean, what you described earlier, I mean, the hustle type plays, those types of just small little game-changing plays.
Or just simply if you say that didn't hurt.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, that
didn't hurt.
You mean like when you get hit in the face and you don't,
Yeah, I don't lay on the ground for 4 minutes, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, I'm going to get up. That.
Yeah.
Bruntz, here's my question though, right? Is if you haven't been that guy your whole life,
right? I know. Yeah.
What are the chances that you become that guy now, right? Like Sam,
maybe it isn't Mia. Maybe it isn't.
Sam Hoiberg's been that guy his whole life, right? Like that's Sam Hoiberg. Yeah. Josiah Alec's been that guy his whole life. That's just who he is, right? I would venture to say it's more rare to turn a guy from somebody who isn't that into one of those toughness guys than it is to turn a guy like Bryce Williams from a 10-point-a-game scorer to an 18-point-a-game scorer. Like, I think the first one's harder.
I get it. Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I meant earlier was like, when you talk about guys that you want a little bit more out of, I mean, at some point they are what they are, and that's what I said. I think there's pieces of both of your discussions that I think are correct. I mean, I'm not asking you don't need like Bryce to go out and just absolutely like cold cock a guy in the lane. I mean, I don't think that's how he is. But
cold cock.
But I do think you need to. I mean, you need somebody to set the tone over there, and it just feels a little. It feels a little rudderless when things aren't going well. Like, who's your voice? And I think that's what I want a little bit more out of is like, okay, you need one of those two guys to either, get in guys' faces, get a little louder than what they're comfortable being. I mean, I'm sure Bryce seems like a pretty chill guy. Like I'm not, thinking that's kind of what he is, but that's what the team needs. I mean, it just, you need somebody that's a little bit more driving the bus. Because it just when things kind of start going bad and guys kind of start standing around outside the 3-point line late in the game looking for something to happen offensively, I think it's got to be one of those two veterans that are gonna make it happen.
So what's interesting, and this is on the heels of me, obviously excited about baseball and what's going on with Nebraska, but we just saw a couple of different pitchers One come out of the bullpen, have a historic year as a starter. Another guy that has been there for 2 years that came out of high school as a phenom that had to kind of find his way along and get better as the year went along. And a guy like Cristo, like we're talking about something that, and maybe it's the mom and the dad in the argument though, but at what point would we have resigned ourselves to what either of those aforementioned pitchers were to not get the results that we ended up getting out of them? Like, coaches just don't think the way of, well, I mean, that's kind of what it's always been. That's how it's going to be. Like, there's just something about coaches and the small degree of being delusional where you're going to constantly keep trying to get it out of guys, right? That's why Sims took so long to come around on, even though he was turning the ball over at a ridiculous rate.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, and it's, the coaches are around those guys all the time. I mean, I think, you have to assume that I think coaches are a little less willing to say, like, this is just who a guy is, like you want like every last opportunity for a guy to show what he can do. And if he can kind of take things to a different level. I don't know if there's probably a little bit of ego in there, right? Like I can get this out of him, or I can be the one to pull it out of him if I just do something different. But it's a good question. I mean, I think it's probably a little bit different situation with the baseball stuff, but because I think that was more role stuff. But yeah, it's.
I don't know, Bruntzy. I mean, guys can show you who they have been versus you thinking, okay, there's something else in there. Let's try this.
Yeah, I can.
I mean, I don't want to talk you into it. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. It's possible.
It is possible, but I think this is kind of where we got into the argument, Bruntz, was yes, it's possible, and we have examples of it being possible, but at what point do you have to play the odds versus playing the exceptions? And I think, this question applies as we go into spring football as well, and you've got too many guys on a roster that you're going to have to cut down some. Like, the question I think really comes down to, at what point do you have to pull the plug on a guy? And now football's their hand's going to be forced, right, because of the roster numbers. But the same question I think applies in basketball when you go, hey, I need to win our next game, right? If you're Fred Hoiberg, you're like, 5 cannot become 6. We got to win the next one. At what point do you maybe pull a plug on a guy, at least in the moment, to say, hey, this guy gives me a better chance to win tomorrow?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what you have to balance. I mean, sometimes I think sometimes, with when you're this far into the season, in some ways, kind of hoping is also a high percentage play. As sad as that is, I mean, it just continuing to hammer away and push buttons. But
I mean, good thing we didn't think that about Jackson Brockett. I mean, come on, guys.
Baseball's weird. I don't count. I give no credit to midseason or midweek baseball stuff. None at all.
I asked you about the same pitcher, Bruntz. It became an ongoing joke last year. We kept running him out there, and it was like, well, maybe this is the week that he snaps out. I mean, that's just coaching.
Yeah, but at some point, if the guy never snaps out of it, that's on you.
Yeah, but
like, you got to eat that at some point.
Sometimes, though, it's like I said, I think sometimes you're the potential that a guy turns it around might sometimes be your most high percentage play in certain situations. So
sure, that's fair.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, I don't think Fred's been a. I guess we're talking about Fred because we were bleeding over into Brockett there, but I do think that he's been willing at times to pull the plug. I mean, I think he sees it.
Do you know where this really came from? I was a little upset with pushback last night that he ended up – this is the first time he decided to start Ulis. And of all the things that we're going to pick at from having roster limitations or being mad at roster construction, I would not have used Ulyss last night is the example. I said things like, maybe Morgan needs a couple of touches, or maybe Mia needs to play a little less, or maybe Berke needs to take a harder foul, or not asked to come out of games. Like, there's little things that you can do within the framework of that roster without having to resign yourself to the fact that it's a bad roster. That's where this whole thing started, Bruntz.
Yeah. Well, and even with the bigs, I mean, I think Morgan's been pretty limited, so that's not helping the options there with an ankle thing. So yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, I think there are small things you can do. I mean, that's where it kind of becomes a test of coaching, right? Like, how do you push some buttons to maybe get a little bit more out of those guys without throwing in the towel on them?
Hey, which competition do you think reveals itself the quickest? Nebraska and spring ball with football, or Nebraska baseball with that non-con schedule?
Yeah, it's a bear. Like, and you've got your out of conference weekend. You got Oregon State coming in here for 3, and I mean, yeah, people are going to focus on LSU and Vandy being on the schedule, but I mean that true road trip to Louisiana, like that, they don't mess around down there, and like Nebraska's going to have to really, that's not a series you're just going to go in there and lightly win. So, the one thing I'll say generally is when you're putting together a schedule like that, I think it's a bit of a reflection of what a coaching staff thinks they have pitching wise, because that's typically where you're able to compete or not compete with those types of teams. Is that if you got the arms that you can roll out there, you'll be in those games. So I don't know. It's a veteran team. They've got basically everybody back in the lineup. They've added a couple guys that are going to also be pretty important in that lineup. And I think there's some confidence over there about the pitching depth that they have too. I mean, I guess everybody kind of does this time of year, and then a month from now we'll see where they're actually at. But you don't put a schedule like that together, if you don't feel like you've got the guys to at least go in there and be pretty darn competitive.
Back to spring football, ideal time for the spring teams where you kind of divvy it up and you play ball to kind of put guys through the sifter, through the colander a little bit and see what shakes out?
Yeah, I mean, it's I was counting last night. The roster's down to 132.
Yeah.
Only 27 left.
It's plenty. It's plenty manageable.
So you gotta get some answers there. It's still a roster that's relatively on the young side. So
yeah,
I mean, you're going to have your veterans more involved in spring ball, obviously, because you're going to have to kind of have a lengthy install with Butler and Damon being in charge now. But I mean, it's probably going to feel a little bit similar to spring ball, where you're really getting a good look at those young guys and letting them play and kind of see, like you said, what shakes out. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a fascinating spring. I mean, it's especially at a few of those position groups where I just don't. I mean, the defensive backs, I mean, you're not going to carry that many guys into the fall. Like, you're going to have to get some answers there in a hurry, I think.
Yeah, half your 27 might be in that room. That's Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. We appreciate the time, as always, Bruntz. We'll talk to you later.
All right. See you. Thanks.
Thanks, MB.
More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back, Hurrdat Sports Radio. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. It's time for Bet On It, brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook. Go to the casinos in Lincoln or in Omaha to place your sports bets. It's the best place. Keep your money on the left side of the river, which is the right side of the river right here in Nebraska, and place your sports bets with Warhorse. DB.
Yes.
You doing all right over there?
No.
You seem like you're struggling a little bit.
I am. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this whole coaching thing.
Here, so I get what you're saying. I really do. I also think you're going to be wrong, not you personally, as a coach.
Yeah.
You're going to be wrong more often than you're right. And maybe that's worth it, because when you're right, it works out really, really well, or it can. But the problem is, if you err on that side too frequently, it will bite you.
Yeah.
Because what did we see? Jeff Sims was a really good example. You brought that up. I'm going to give you credit there. He was a really good example of this because the coaches obviously saw something in him that they liked, and they thought that they could nourish and get it to come out and be who he was, right? Is that fair?
Yeah.
What everyone else saw drove them crazy.
Yeah.
Including, I'm guessing, some of his teammates.
Yeah. But here's the reason why Sims is a good but not a great example.
Okay.
Because they didn't give the experiment A long time.
Longer than some of us would have liked.
Well, not really, though, because even when Nebraska came back to Lincoln for their first home game, they went with H2 again.
Yeah.
Even though Sims was kind of hurt, but kind of practicing, it still was, all right, let's go with this. It wasn't as long as we make it seem.
It felt like an eternity.
No, I know.
But you're right. It was 2 games, basically, right?
Yeah.
It felt like an eternity, though.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say longer than some of us would have liked. But that's an example of them pulling the plug reasonably early.
Right.
But they also had their hand forced a little bit.
And to Nebraska's credit, we saw what we felt like was the end game with Coach Harburg, with Harburg by the end of the season. So you could at least, if you had half a brain or you were objective, you could say, well, I could see why they wanted it to go this way early.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, you could see that Harburg was limited in some areas.
So, like, I don't.
And let's not pretend like Jeff Sims at Georgia Tech didn't have some incredible highlights, because he did.
Yeah.
Right? So I get.
So it was relative to the hand that I think they were dealt.
100%. And that matters here, too, in terms of time frame.
Yeah, if I'm sitting in a 2-5 no limit game and the best hand that I'm going to get is pocket threes all day, like, I got to play differently.
Sure.
I got to take a few more chances.
100%.
Right?
You're going to have to bluff a little bit more. And so I definitely understand that. I think where it gets a little dangerous.
Like mystical? Danger! Woo, woo!
Nope.
Get on the floor. I should not use I if anybody has any historical context to mystical, I should probably not use him. He's a bit of a criminal.
Not a great guy?
No, I don't think so. No.
So do you want to use Michael Jackson instead?
What are we?
So was he was dangerous, right?
Yeah, he was dangerous.
But he's also
not
apparently not a great example.
Well, he has the song "Smooth Criminal," so I mean, if you want to go down that road.
Oh, foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
good morning again.
Shane,
can you keep the unalive out of your mouth?
Shane, you just want to drop P. Diddy on us too now, or what?
Yeah.
Like what? Yeah. What are we doing out here, Shane?
Wow. I'm not putting all those guys in the same boat together.
And is there anybody can we use different people?
Like who?
Oh, I don't know. I just didn't like the 3 examples we gave.
You prefer like Bill Cosby or?
Wow. No, still similar vein.
Oh, he's older though. He's not a musician. I thought that's what we were doing here. You wanted somebody in a different part of the entertainment industry?
Oh, he did songs.
Oh, stop it.
Stop it.
I mean,
what about our most infamous island owner? Is that better?
No. Hashtag too soon.
Okay, I'm just asking. I didn't.
Infamous island owner.
I don't know who we're going for here.
All right.
I mean, by the end, Michael Jackson was a little different than what you're talking about here.
Okay.
Didn't have a lot of resemblance to Tito at that point.
How did you guys get down this road?
What happened? The collective pucker.
Wow. Anyway, so
what?
Can't.
Who sent it?
No, I was gonna say it.
Oh, joke Tourette's?
Yeah.
Yeah. Move on.
Shut it down. Shut it down. What do we got for games tonight, DB?
It's not a great slate.
Well, I smell bad.
Shane, what is that from? Because I think it's hilarious.
It's from Boys in the Hood.
No, it's not.
I haven't seen that movie. I don't know.
Which, by the way, when Damon is disappointed in you need to get it.
And I'll bet you that you lose that.
He does not strike me as the poster child for urbanics.
I'm disappointed in DeMarinis that he doesn't listen to the show enough to get the joke.
He goes back and gets it on.
I know, but he didn't get the joke that I made. Like if he was listening to the show a little closer, he'd understand the Boys in the Hood joke that I made in the group chat.
You can't cover as many things as he does in depth and
I just thought he was one of our friends. That's all. Thought he cared for us. Thought he'd be concerned about
Oh, shoot, Ravi.
Yeah, was concerned about our collective puckering, you know.
You got a lot of problems.
Who, me?
Yes.
Illinois has Maryland tonight.
Yeah, and you know what's weird?
How do you feel about that number?
I kind of like Maryland.
Do you?
I wouldn't lock it up though, but if I had to play it, I'll take the 9.
Oh, I've got it at 7.5.
Yeah,
Is it plummeting?
Wow, is it 7.5 now?
I've got Illinois at 7.5.
Are you going
now?
back
This is ESPN, so our lines are a little different sometimes, but I've got Illinois at minus 7.5.
Usually TK reconciles this.
TK, find us the number.
Yeah. You're right. You're currently.
It dropped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. It is 7.5.
So a lot of Maryland money coming in.
Well, let me go to the details and watch the movement.
Mm-hmm. You do love you some line movement.
Okay. So I'm not dumb. This is last night.
Okay.
11:48, 9:02, 8:58, 9, 9.5, 10, 9. So at one point it was
got up to 10.
So it's not as nice a plump number
for Maryland. If you like Maryland plus,
if I would as I would have liked. But I would definitely take Maryland. And this is going against my Illini at home.
You do love you some Fighting Illini.
Yeah, I'm gonna need you to not.
You do. They're your pseudo favorite.
We're not just about to throw around the word love.
They're your pseudo favorite Big Ten team. I think so. That's fair. I think they're the team in the Big Ten you like the best.
Yeah, not historically. Just
this year. This year. Yeah.
I do think. Although they're gonna screw me.
Why is that?
Because they embody everything that I don't like. They lack consistency.
Kind of light switchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hate volatility.
Yeah.
So it goes against my normal thought process, but they are by far and away the most capable. And by the way, you know why I don't like Michigan State?
Why is that?
Because I'm probably one of the few guys that doesn't really. I don't like Fears right now.
Yeah.
I think his shot selection stinks. But that's a good
team.
And Kohler's starting to play better interiorly, so like they can play through that guy.
I'll tell you the same thing about Illinois that I told my buddy Evan at the start of the season.
You know, people are going to think his first name is my buddy.
Yeah, my buddy Evan. That's his full name.
Because he's never just Evan. You always say my buddy Evan.
No, that's his government name. Is my buddy Evan.
Hey, what's your name, my buddy? Huh?
It's
like the little doll.
No.
My buddy.
I just like people to know he's my friend.
You ain't got any of those.
Is that I don't totally trust Underwood.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about him. He seems like a fine coach.
You sound like such a politician.
I just don't
like such a fine coach.
I don't totally trust it.
Oh.
And I feel like we've seen that play out with Illinois over the course of the season.
We need to be cheering for the Mavs. And they're actually catching points at home, ladies and
Against
gentlemen.
St. Thomas.
Yes.
Was it 1.5 still?
No, it's 3.
It's 3 now?
Seems like a lot for two teams that are playing well, but
it was 1.5 last night.
St. Thomas is pretty good.
Some money coming in on St. Thomas, apparently.
Yeah. I got one for you.
What do we got?
Let's lock it up. Let's lock up Santa Clara.
Santa Clara. What's the number?
5.
Okay.
Hosting your Cougars. Not a regular Cougar.
BYU?
Washington State.
Heuston?
Washington.
Too many Cougars. That's DB. I'm Ravi. Let's bet on it.
Not enough for Shane.
Brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook.
Heard that.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio and 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, Capital R, and Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi, Lulla, and we're brought to you by our friends over at Midlands Family Urgent Care. It's not too late to get your weight loss on track here in the new year. Give Midlands Family Urgent Care a call, and they can have you in and out with a quick consultation with one of their medical professionals, and you might be qualified to get either tirzepatide or semaglutide, this FDA-approved weight loss medication that can help you lose weight. I've lost over 30 pounds, and it's been a huge help for me. Make sure you give them a call at the Millard location, 402-810-9494, to set up a visit today. DB.
What do you want now?
I just wanted to talk, maybe be friends a little bit and have a nice conversation.
No.
Have I been too mean today?
No. I
feel like I've been nice.
There's a little notion of hard-headedness.
Oh, well, that's always there.
Well, I mean, outside of that, I think we're good.
I feel like that's a given. It's sort of just,
so
part of the platter.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bring out the party platter. There's some garnishes you don't like. The hard-headedness is my garnish.
I do. I do like the distinction. See, Bruntz didn't allow me, kind of like me suggesting Dylan Raiola as as the poster child for development. He didn't let me ask him a leading question and give in. He did not fall for the Brett Sears analogy for pitching. Right, because I kind of casually said, well, when would Nebraska have made their mind up on Brett Sears? Like they had seen enough. And he's like, well, That could be more about kind of just his role.
Sure.
But I understand what you're saying. Or, what was the ongoing joke last year? I think I asked him about Caleb Clark once a week.
Yeah. Every time we talk to him.
Right?
Throughout the season.
Or I got a couple buddies. And one of them that I like is what I would call he's probably harder on Drew Christo than most.
Okay.
And he knows Drew's my guy. He's just keeping it 100. So I'm not mad at him over that. But, what if they would have known what they knew about Drew Christo?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if baseball is
baseball's a tough analogy for me.
Well, you guys just kind of, but it's not really, though.
It can be. Baseball is so.
Because it's so much about managing failures?
Yes. It's so mental. It's so much more mental. And that.
So you drew the line at baseball for all my analogies?
I don't know if I'm drawing the line. I just have a hard time making a direct correlation. There's some overlap
asking Morgan to do similar things that he's already done at NDSU, but a little more of it at Nebraska.
Yeah, and I mentioned Andrew Morgan's, for me, is probably a bad example of what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Because he's more capable, I think, than some of these other guys.
Okay, well, what about Burke?
Yeah, Burke, I don't know. I don't know that I would pull the plug on Burke because he's one of the younger guys, and there is an opportunity.
Is that similar to would you give me that for a baseball analogy?
Sure. He's managing some failure right now.
Okay.
And I think he's capable, so sure.
At least I know you're not, totally.
So Burke is a good example of, hey, maybe this guy isn't a closer, but maybe he's a really good setup man, right? I think he's got tools in his toolbox to be successful.
But you're still working within this. Okay. So you do have okay. So you're at least open to what I'm saying.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Because maybe Burke somehow is a Drew Christo, just figuring out how to use him.
Yeah, what role is best for him within his skill set?
But you got to hold him to it,
both physically and mentally.
You got to hold him to it.
Sure.
Because what I didn't say about that DM that I couldn't find was, I don't know if it was Ryan. It was somebody, not our Ryan, a different Ryan, was asking me about the fine line between freedom of movement within the program versus, hey, you're not helping us do that in the lineup, so please don't do that.
For sure. Right? I think that's
because that was his question, and I think that was a week or two ago.
So that's why I brought up freedom isn't always freedom, right? It's freedom within the role that you understand and are assigned, right?
Yeah.
You can have a lot of leeway within your given role, and some guys' roles are much broader than others. Like Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary's roles are much broader than Berke's role needs to be. They're much broader than Andrew Morgan's role needs to be, right? Or you want to go positionally the same. Their roles are much broader than Sam Hoiberg's needs to be, right? And so they're going to have more leeway and more freedom within that role. But a guy like Sam Hoiberg needs to understand, and I would say he does pretty well, what he's there for and what positives he brings to the table. When you start getting outside of those things, you start being detrimental not only to yourself but to your team.
Yeah, because you know what I'm not really mad at Coach Hoiberg for?
What's that?
Which is where this whole conversation started. He's going to try options.
Yeah, I'm not saying you shouldn't exhaust your options.
You know what I mean?
You certainly
he's
should. And especially at this point in the season, you kind of have to exhaust your options because what's the rest of your choice, right?
Okay, so what are they in the conference?
2-6. 2-6.
Okay, so you have more than half the conference play to go.
Yeah.
So we don't have to panic quite yet. And again, the catalyst for this whole conversation was not resigning yourself to the roster.
Sure. And
we've got the roster construction isn't very good.
On a macro scale,
might just have to deal with it as
on a macro scale.
Actually, you don't, guys. That's what coaching matters.
You don't have to resign yourself for the season. I do think with individuals, and I don't like the term resign yourself, but I think you just have to accept that some guys are going to be who they are. And within the construct of your roster, you have to keep being resilient from there.
Okay.
Because certain guys probably are who they are.
So if I was a tag team, I would be Hawk, and I'm tagging Animal, who is Justin currently.
What's up?
Because we got where you and I got sideways in this deal was the whole developmental thing versus age.
Sure.
And it's and Justin says, agree or disagree? I don't want to ask it in a leading manner.
Okay.
Hoiberg needs to get to the point where we're not having big roster turnover in the portal. Hoiberg is a true developmental coach, and he'll get the best from players that stick with him. Age dependent, agree, disagree? Because I would high five Justin right now, and I would say Sometimes it's just about being comfortable in your own skin long enough to see it work.
Yeah, that's mostly what I mean.
Are you sure?
Yes, because it's not age necessarily, but I agree with the not having the roster turnover. Like, that's important.
Because the age thing is where it got me to really spiral.
And age isn't really probably what I meant.
Because people can get better.
Yeah, age probably isn't really what I meant, but having runway within the program.
Dang, it took Justin to get you to come around?
Get better. He just said it better than I was able to.
Okay, JR.
Like, that's mostly what I meant. Is that
wasn't the Road Warriors reference?
No. I think you need.
But because Justin got you to come to your senses, I will let him pick whether he wants to be hawk or animal.
I think you need runway within.
Preferably let me be the alive guy.
You need runway within the program to develop the way you guys are talking about. It's not necessarily an age
But he's
thing.
gotten it, though.
With some guys, yes. And with those guys have gotten
why
better.
I bristled up over why are we acting like March of 2023 wasn't a thing? We just were using that as a frame of reference.
No, I get that, but you had more. I think you had more guys that had been in the program longer to get to where you wanted to be. And it took a long time for a lot of those guys, right? I mean, look at the guys that have gotten good under Fred Hoiberg, and they've gotten the best out of under Fred Hoiberg. They're the guys that have been there multiple years. Like Bryce Williams is better this year for Nebraska than he was last year. Juwan Gary is 3 years into the program.
Age thing?
I was more talking about like time in the program as opposed to age.
Okay.
It came off as age, and that's on me. I meant time in the program. I need multiple years in the program if you're going to be developmental. That's why when you brought up the football thing, I was like, yeah, I get that. They patched some holes with some one-year guys, but they mostly wanted multiple-year guys, right? Because they're a developmental program. You need years in the program to do that. It's really hard to do with one-year guys because if it doesn't go well early, it's really hard to go back and get. Like, that's super challenging as a coach, especially if you don't have a ton of leeway in terms of what your success has been up to that point. Like, we're still sort of in a proof of concept mode with Fred being successful here. He's been a lot better the last few years, but it's not like he's been so successful that he automatically gets the benefit of the doubt, right? He doesn't have that track record like we mentioned to Bill Self. Like, Bill Self's always getting the benefit of the doubt, especially externally, right? I get Kansas fans might get a little whatever, but he's going to get the benefit of the doubt because he's Bill Self. Like, Fred Hoiberg's not to that point yet. And so...
Yeah, I think he's a pretty good coach.
I do too, but he's not benefit of the doubt at Nebraska good, right?
Well, but who... See, so that goes back to my original point, though, is the muck, the junk that surrounds the program.
Yeah, that's real.
Because that's where the whole like if we rewind way back to like the ability to shake that, even though if we just stay right here, right, to pull a Coach Williams from yesterday in terms of or Coatney,
stay in the moment.
Coatney when he's like, hey, my advice would be, which was beautiful. And we're like, well, why is that so hard to do?
It's harder than everybody realizes.
Than the whole shoe to drop thing. Because that was really the whole first segment.
Have you ever heard Phil Jackson talk about what Michael Jordan's superpower was?
Yeah, we've given this analogy. And then I would inevitably come back and say, but yet you still hate on Phil Jackson. And then you'd say, well, it's because he had Michael Jordan. Or
I don't hate on Phil Jackson. I question his overall like X's and O's prowess.
I understand. I don't want to derail you.
But the thing that he would always say 100% of the time that Michael Jordan's superpower was staying in the moment, right? Michael Jordan was able to make all these clutch shots because it was just another shot to him. He wasn't feeling the weight of the moment. He was just in the moment. If you feel the weight of everything, that moment becomes infinitely harder.
Yeah, and right on cue, Kobe will say something like, Hoiberg doesn't get a pass just from one successful season. So at what point? So part of it is us. Like, when can we move on from carrying the weight of historical failures?
Yeah, I mean, and part of it for me,
that's the counter opposite of what you're just saying about Jordan. Where
totally fair.
Where the shot was just the shot. It wasn't.
What
happened last shot or
it wasn't
6 years ago missing that.
100%. But here's the problem: is as fans, we aren't forced to stay in the moment. As players, you have to, despite what's going on around you. Like, that's the biggest difference. We can talk about it as fans, and we have to talk about the big picture. But as players, you have to ignore all that and stay in the moment. It's really challenging. And honestly, it's simple versus easy. It's simple. Not very many guys can do it. That's Hurrdat Sports Radio. We'll be back tomorrow.
See you. Have a good day. Love you.